The political feud only grows within the People Power Party, with its presidential candidate Kim Moon-soo colliding head-on with the party leadership over a candidacy merger with Han Duk-soo, while talks between Kim and Han once again ended with no clear results. On the other side, the Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung today campaigned with a key focus on the economy, the day after his key trial was pushed back until after the election. North Korea fired short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea earlier in the morning, with pundits raising the possibility of a pre-test of weaponry for the purpose of export to Russia. The U.S. Federal Reserve has kept its key rate steady once again, citing increasing uncertainty stemming from U.S. tariffs. It's May 8th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. The rift is only growing within the conservative bloc over a candidacy merger between PPP's Kim Moon-soo and former Prime Minister Han Duk-soo before the deadline for official candidate registration set by the election watchdog. The two met again this afternoon following yesterday's talks that fell apart, only to reaffirm their differences. For more, our correspondent Oh Soo-young is on the line. So-young, let's begin with their one-hour meeting, which was entirely made public.
Sure, Jung-min. Kim Moon-soo and Han Duk-soo met at 4:33 p.m. to hold their second round of talks at the National Assembly to discuss forming a joint bid for the presidential election. In a fashion unprecedented in modern Korean politics, the People Power Party candidate and ex-Prime Minister running as an independent seated themselves at an outdoor cafe table for a televised discussion. But the swap of smiles and small talk soon turned into a heated debate, which ended abruptly after an hour after they decided they couldn't narrow down their differences. Kim continuously challenged Han's relatively late entry into the race, citing his lack of participation in the PPP primary. He also criticized Han for saying he wouldn't run if they don't merge before this Sunday, when candidate registrations close, and suggested they should both run separate campaigns until a televised debate and polling next week. Han, meanwhile, stressed there is no time to lose amid pressing economic and geopolitical issues and the growing danger of the Democratic Party gaining ground. He renewed pressure on Kim not to stall the process of joining forces, saying that their union is the command of the people. He reiterated that he would do all that the PPP wants for a collaboration and put the ball in Kim's court, noting how Kim had pledged to merge with him at least 22 times in recent weeks. After emerging as the leading PPP candidate in last week's primary, Kim has resisted the party leadership's strong push to unite with Han to challenge the Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung, who currently leads the polls.
We're seeing the rift between PPP's candidate and leadership escalate also. They collided head-on this morning, which was a very unusual scene.
Yes, indeed. The PPP leadership has slammed Kim for his newfound resistance to joining forces with Han Duk-soo, suggesting a change of the party candidate hasn't been decided but is still technically possible. This came after Kim on Thursday morning accused the party elders of, quote, illegal and undemocratic moves to thwart his candidacy in favor of the former PM and rejected the party's roadmap to quickly form a union this week. Arguing that he should be the one to set the terms on a merger, Kim has further claimed that he presented a proposal to Han during the first discussion on Wednesday, but insinuated that the former PM has aligned himself with the PPP leadership. Han has denied both claims as of Thursday. Although Kim continues to revolt, the party decided it would proceed with a poll on the two candidates from 7 p.m. tonight until 4 p.m. on Friday to garner public and party opinion in a 50-50 ratio. While some PPP members, including former presidential contenders, have criticized the leadership for undermining the party's candidacy procedures, spokesperson Shin Dong-wook has justified the push for a merger, noting 87% of PPP members support a Kim-Han union before May 11th.
All right, Soo-young, thank you for your coverage. Against this backdrop, the focus of the Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung today was on the economy and people's livelihoods, hoping to expand his appeal to a broader audience. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
Economic policy was the first message Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung turned to on Thursday, just a day after clearing key legal hurdles facing him before this presidential election. He held a roundtable with leaders from 5 major business organizations, including the Korea Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Korean Industries, highlighting his pro-business stance in a bid to win over undecided voters and widen his apparent lead in the race. He said the days of the government providing industries with direction and deciding what to do are over.
We must now place trust in the expertise and capabilities of the private sector, with the government playing a strong supporting role behind the scenes. Without this shift in approach, it will be difficult to overcome the challenges we face. In particular, I believe it's time for us to stop being a follower and to start leading the way forward.
On top of this, he emphasized that the livelihood of the people was in a dire situation. And this, to him, was the most important aspect of his campaign. He also tried to ease the concerns of the business leaders and that he won't be pushing on 4.5 workdays and that there will be plenty of discussion before this actually happens. After this, he also took to YouTube Live to meet with 4 economy, stocks, and real estate YouTubers. There, they discussed various issues as he started the conversation off saying he was a small investor as well. Meanwhile, he also responded to North Korea's multiple short-range ballistic missile launches toward the East Sea earlier on Thursday. While condemning the action, he also said it's now time to ease tension and open up inter-Korean dialogue. On top of this, he said the stalled U.S.-North Korea talks must resume. As for the upcoming official presidential election, Lee's campaign announced that it'll kick off official rallies on May 12th at Gwanghwamun Square. This is because of the site's symbolic meaning as a site of the Revolution of Light. The Democratic Party refers to the process of overcoming the December 3rd martial law and subsequent unrest as a Revolution of Light. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Earlier this morning, North Korea launched a series of short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea. Pundits link the latest provocation to Pyongyang possibly exporting its weapons to Russia in support of war. Kim Bo-kyung explains.
North Korea fired multiple short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea on Thursday, the first in around 2 months.
Our military detected multiple short-range ballistic missiles of various types launched into the East Sea from the Wonsan area in North Korea between approximately 8:10 a.m. and 9:20 a.m. today.
The missiles are believed to include the KN-23, a North Korean version of the Iskander missile, and the KN-25, a 600mm super-large multiple rocket launcher. Some flew around 250 kilometers, landing near Al Island, a rock island at the frontal waters of Gilju-gun County of Hamgyong-pukto Province, while some of the others flew 350 kilometers and fell more than 100 kilometers beyond the island. While saying such missile launches are clear acts of provocation that seriously threaten peace on the Korean peninsula, the South Korean military said it is looking into the specifics, sharing information with the U.S. and Japan. Thursday's launch is the first since early March and the second ballistic missile launch since U.S. President Donald Trump returned to the White House on January 20th. As for the reason behind such provocation amid relatively peaceful times on the peninsula, with no whole Washington joint drills going on, nor any strategic assets in place, one expert says he agrees with the JCS's assessment that the missile launch is to test the weaponry for export to Russia.
North Korea is focusing efforts quite strategically on weapons that could be used immediately on the battlefields of the Ukraine war, including short and medium-range missiles. It appears the regime is continuously developing and testing those that are advantageous for export.
Responding to Pyongyang's missile launch, the Presidential National Security Office held an emergency meeting to discuss the missile launch and response measures. Presided by the second deputy director, the office said the government will closely monitor North Korea's movements and maintain a full readiness posture to respond to any provocations. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Officials from the U.S. and China will be sitting down in Geneva this weekend, hoping to resolve hefty tariffs imposed on each other's products. Ahead of the event, Mr. Trump has rejected reducing levies on Beijing. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Amid escalating trade tensions between the United States and China, U.S. President Donald Trump said he won't lower his 145% tariff on Chinese imports before trade talks happen between the two countries. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Wednesday, Trump was asked if he would be open to pulling back on his tariffs in order to bring China to the negotiation table, to which he simply replied, no. The comments come as Beijing said earlier that meaningful negotiations would only happen if Washington lowers the 145% tariffs first. His comments come as a meeting between U.S. and Chinese trade officials is set to take place in Geneva on Saturday. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer are set to meet with China's economic chief He Lifeng in what could be the first step towards de-escalating tensions between the two economic powers. Speaking to Fox News earlier this week, Bessent said the trade talks will center mostly on de-escalating tensions and not on a big trade deal. Last month, President Trump raised import duties on Chinese goods to 145%, despite scaling back on his reciprocal tariffs on almost all other U.S. trading partners. China retaliated with steep tariffs on U.S. goods, further escalating the trade tensions. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has left its key interest rate unchanged yet again, a decision made at a critical time when it comes to not just the U.S. economy, but also the world economy. For more on this, our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin joins us in the studio. Soo-jin, first, tell us about the decision and where the rates stand now.
Sure. So in its third monetary policy meeting of the year, the U.S. Fed has decided to continue its wait-and-see stance by, as you just said, keeping rates steady. The decision to keep the current key borrowing rate range of 4.25% to 4.5% on Wednesday local time extends the pause in the Federal Open Market Committee's rate-cutting cycle, which has been in place since January. Here's what Fed Chair Jerome Powell said were the reasons behind the rate freeze decision.
The risks of higher unemployment and higher inflation appear to have risen, and we believe that the current stance of monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments.
And these risks to employment and inflation, the two pillars of the Fed's dual mandate, stem from the uncertainty surrounding President Trump's tariffs. The decision to hold rates steady was thus unanimous despite weeks of pressure from Trump to lower them, resulting in him even threatening to fire Powell, which he eventually backed off of. Still, he and his administration remained firm in their stance that the Fed should cut rates, arguing that high borrowing costs are no longer needed as prices have steadily cooled. But according to one expert, while recent inflation data shows some easing, future price trends remain uncertain due to Trump's ongoing tariff threats. Let's take a listen.
The latest consumer inflation report saw a 2.4% year-over-year rise in March. The one-year outlook compiled by the University of Michigan stand at 6.5%. The main driver of the jump in inflation expectation is, President Trump's tariff policy.
Then when can we expect the Fed to lower rates?
Right, so experts actually remain divided on when this will happen, and that's because the Fed is likely to wait until it's more certain about the economic impact of tariffs, such as through economic data. Let's listen.
But the fact is that the markets hate uncertainty, and by the way, so does the Fed. So the Fed doesn't want to do anything until we get clarity, and that's going to take some time.
And this is in line with how Powell said that it, quote, depends when asked if there will be rate cuts at all this year. Tangible economic data required before the Fed cuts rates include inflation remaining relatively contained while the job market or economic growth weakens further. And according to an expert, this impact will surface in the second half, also when rate cuts are expected to begin.
They'll definitely start cutting rates in the second half. With oil prices and other factors relatively stable, inflation is starting to ease. Once that trend becomes clear, the Fed will likely move to lower rates more decisively.
And what does all this mean for the future policy rate decision here at home?
For one, it's expected to have quite a significant impact because the Bank of Korea closely watches the Fed's interest rate decisions. The latest rate freeze leaves a key interest rate gap between South Korea and the United States at 1.75 percentage points based on the upper end of each country's rates. And the rate gap puts the BOK in a tough position ahead of its own meeting later this month, as an even larger gap could lead to capital outflows that push the won down further, raising import costs and adding to inflation. But Korea's central bank is likely to lower interest rates due to the sluggish domestic economy. Here's what another expert said.
While the exchange rate is now in the upper 1,301 range, domestic factors are becoming more important for rate cuts. Ideally, the Fed would cut rates too, but given Korea's tough domestic situation, many expect the Bank of Korea to cut rates in May.
Data released by the central bank last month showed that the country's real gross domestic product, a key indicator of the economy, shrank by 0.2% quarter-on-quarter in the first quarter. The government has vowed to remain vigilant, as acting finance minister Kim Bum-seok said on Thursday in response to the Fed leaving rates unchanged that the government will hold weekly macroeconomic financial meetings to monitor markets and ensure economic stability.
All right, Sejin, thank you for the report.
Thank you for having me.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping have held their first in-person summit of the year in Moscow. Xi's visit coincides with Russia's 80th Victory Day celebrations tomorrow on Friday. The two leaders exchanged greetings, referring to one another as friend, while Putin said both countries would stand together against, quote, neo-Nazism. He also thanked Xi for inviting him to China's upcoming 80th anniversary, marking its victory over Japan in September. Xi also stressed joint efforts as major powers to counter what he called unilateralism and bullying. At the Vatican, black smoke billowed from the Sistine Chapel's chimney on the first day of the voting by cardinals to elect a new pope, meaning no consensus was made. 4 rounds of voting is slated for Thursday. Ian, he has more.
Black smoke rose from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican on Wednesday, signaling that the conclave had failed to elect a new pope on the first day. As the dark smoke curled into the night sky, a wave of disappointment swept through the crowd gathered at St. Peter's Square, many of whom have been waiting for hours.
It's an immersion. It's an immersion to be here, especially, and we will be here again tomorrow. It was expected to be black smoke today for the first vote.
The black smoke from the burning ballots came more than 3 hours after the start of the conclave, taking longer than expected. This was an hour longer than it took for smoke to appear after the first vote in the 2013 conclave that elected the late Pope Francis.
I would like it to be a pope who continues the legacy of Pope Francis, meaning that he's a more open, more liberal pope, because that is the way to attract people to the church.
To be elected, a new pope must secure at least 89 votes, a 2/3 majority. The conclave will resume on Thursday, with 133 cardinals from 70 countries voting in strict secrecy.
Yes, we'll come back tomorrow because we live here. So tomorrow from the morning, we'll be on the lookout to see if there's white smoke.
When a pope is chosen, white smoke will emerge from the chimney. Starting Thursday, the cardinals will hold 4 votes a day, 2 votes in the morning session and 2 in the afternoon. Ian-hee, Arirang News.
Pakistani officials say the country's air defense system neutralized a dozen Indian drones overnight that intruded into various locations. The officials added that 4 troops were wounded by a drone that attacked a military target near Pakistan's Lahore city. No immediate comments have yet come from India. The incident follows India's missile strikes on Pakistani locations the previous day that reportedly killed at least 31 civilians. In response, Pakistan vowed retaliation, saying India would now have to pay the price for its actions. Back here in Korea, the Busan International Film Festival turns 30 this year, and when the festival opens this fall, it'll include a competition category. Cha Yoon-kyung explains the change.
The Busan International Film Festival, the first international film festival in Korea, will introduce a competition category this year, transitioning from a non-competitive showcase to a competition format in order to secure its position as a powerhouse in the Asian film landscape. Marking the 30th anniversary this year, the BIFF's committee highlighted the need for a competition section to better recognize Asia's outstanding cinema and directors. The awards will be given with trophies like world-renowned film festivals.
We have decided to create the competition section since there was a need for change in format. We thought the same patterns were repeated over and over.
The Busan International Film Festival has grown from Korea's first international film festival to Korea's largest and has become a famous film festival loved by many filmmakers and audiences alike, not only in Asia but also around the world. This year, BIFF is revamping lots of programs to coincide with its 30th anniversary. The committee plans to invite a lot more movies and increase the number of theaters this year. There will be more sessions of Midnight Passion, a selection of horror and thriller films, to keep devoted fans awake throughout the night. Various forums to discuss the problems of Korean movies and their solutions will also be held. In a notable break with tradition, the grand prize winner will screen as a festival's closing film for a grand finale. Veteran filmmaker Min Gyu-dong will oversee both the opening and closing ceremonies, promising a more dynamic presentation for the landmark edition. There was also a generational transition within the organizing committee and programmers, seeking more flexible and efficient operation. The BIFF this year will be held for 10 days from September 17th at Busan Cinema Center and other selected theaters. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Parents' Day brought a touch of early summer warmth, great weather to spend meaningful time with family. Now we have rainy to forecast for the entire country starting early tomorrow. And we're talking about some decent downpours along with thunderstorms. Jeju could see over 200 millimeters of downpours. Southern coast could see up to 80 millimeters. The rest of the country could see 10 to 50 millimeters of showers. Then afternoon highs will be nearly 10 degrees lower than today in the capital area, and the rest of the country will also notice breezier highs. Let's check on our lows first. Seoul starts off at 15 degrees Celsius, Daegu at 13 degrees, and highs will not rise much, getting up to just 16 degrees in the capital, Daegu at 18 degrees Celsius. The rain will bring a dip in daytime highs through Saturday with lingering rain in central areas. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.